All right, post-flood archaeology and history. Well, what I would like to talk about is what I believe is the rediscovery of the Ark of Noah. Now, some of you may know that over the years, I mean, when I say over the years, I'm talking about over the centuries, people have seen the Ark. They've claimed to have seen the Ark, and I'll talk about that. I'll talk about the rediscovery of the Ark. I believe it's the Ark. I'll show you the evidence that I found. And I also provide a list of references that you guys can take with you, and you can do some more research on your own. And we'll talk about that, and then I'll talk about some updates to mythological lectures that I've given in the past. When I give a lecture, or at least on these topics of mythology, I'll keep doing research. I'll keep watching videos about them on YouTube, and sometimes I'll come across something. Well, I've come across a few things that I think are so important that I want to share with you guys. Is it working? Okay, it's working. And then at the end, I'll introduce what I believe is a very important interpretation, at least just an introduction now, not the whole thing, but an introduction to Hindu mythology and how Hindu mythology, mostly the artwork, how it also, just like the other mythologies that I've talked about in the past, how they point back to Genesis. Oh, by the way, there's soda over here and there's cookies for anybody who wants them. Has anybody seen my past lectures about mythology? Hey, whoa, two people. And oh, there we go. We got another an actual one. Oh, and then another one too. All right, good. I think it's pretty amazing, but again, you guys have to judge for yourself. So this evening I'll go over Genesis. I'm looking at you guys probably know Genesis really well, so I'll go quickly through that. I'll go over an overview of sort of the general timeline that I'm talking about for my lecture tonight. I'll talk about Noah's Ark. I believe it's been rediscovered. You'll have to decide for yourself. I'll talk about the mythological updates that I mentioned, and then I'll introduce Hindu mythology and how I believe it also, just like the other mythologies, go back to the book of Genesis, early Genesis, and then we'll conclude the whole thing and I'll wrap it up. All right, so Genesis 1 through 11, chapters 1 through 11, as you know, God created the heavens and the earth. God spent his spirit to hover over the face of the deep. God created for 6 days, rested on the seventh. He created Adam and Eve. The serpent came along, tempted Eve, and Adam and Eve fell from grace. They sinned, therefore God shoved them out of the garden. God put at the entrance to the garden the cherubim. The cherubim are described, at least, they're not described in Genesis, but they're described later in Ezekiel. They have 4 wings, they have 4 heads, and here they're standing at the entrance. They also have a flaming sword that goes back and forth. Later on, after Adam and Eve were kicked out, Cain slew Abel as Cain and Adam and Eve's other children, Seth as a for instance, as they started growing in population. Later on, the world became a sad and violent place, and only Noah's family was righteous. So God then, as you know, sent the flood. The ark landed, after the flood, the ark landed in the mountains of Ararat. So the Bible doesn't tell us exactly where, but it does say the mountains of Ararat. After Noah's family came off the ark, off of the mountains of Ararat, they repopulated to a point, but they crowded around Babel built a tower, and God came down and confused our languages at the Tower of Babel, and then they scattered across the earth like they were supposed to right when they got off the ark. Okay, so the timeline here, obviously we start with creation. Noah's flood probably occurred around 4,300 years ago. After the flood, it's thought that maybe 100 years later was the Tower of Babel, so around 4,200 years ago. After the Tower of Babel occurred, people scattered throughout the world. The Mesopotamians went to Mesopotamia, the Greeks, the Egyptians, the Lenape started in that area, Mesopotamian area, and they ended up in New Jersey. Did anybody know that? Lenape used to live here in New Jersey. There are still some here. Pardon me? Lenape, yep. There are still some here. There are, I think, if I remember correctly, there's probably around 12,000 still here in New Jersey, but a bunch of them were kicked out. Some of them are in Oklahoma. Some of them went up to Canada. And then, of course, I'll also talk about Hindu mythology as well. But these spanning out of these different cultures obviously would have occurred after the Tower of Babel, and it might have taken, in this case, we're probably talking about maybe a couple of thousand years between the Tower of Babel and the Lenape ended up making it to New Jersey. The Egyptians, maybe a couple hundred years, I don't really know, but I believe, my theory was when I gave these lectures, was that these different nations passed down the history that they learned, in the first 11 chapters of Genesis. They passed it down by word of mouth. And that is why their mythologies are so sort of out of this world. They're so wild. Okay. I first heard about NAMI. NAMI is the Noah's Ark Ministry International. They're based in Hong Kong, and they are dedicated to finding Noah's Ark. They went up on Mount Ararat. They paid a Turkish guy, Parasut, was his name, Parasut, and they went up there. They took some video, and they took some samples, did some carbon-14 testing, and they claimed that they found Noah's Ark. And now I don't know exactly when I heard about them. I think it was a few years later that I heard about them, maybe 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And I remember seeing their shorter videos on YouTube, and I was like, wow, that's pretty crazy. I think they found it, Well, a little bit later, some folks, some creationists that I felt were, trustworthy, they came along and said, well, it's a fraud. I was so disappointed. I was so deflated. Well, NAMI were supposed to come out with a sort of a longer video documenting all this. And I kept looking for it, and I never found it, at least for a while. And I eventually just sort of forgot about it. Well, last year, I managed to start seeing YouTube videos by Dr. Klenck on YouTube. Now, he began writing articles and putting YouTube videos on YouTube back in 2020. I found out about it last year, so I started watching his videos. Well, Dr. Klenck he has some relationship to the NAMI folks. I don't know if he was kind of an expert. Dr. Klenck is an expert in marine boats and ships and barges, but he is also an archaeologist himself. So he's got that dual title, if you will. But his information on YouTube and on his website, by the way, his website is on that handout there. If you guys want a handout, these are all my references that I wanted you guys to have. He provided much more information than the NAMI group did in their videos. So I went through his website, his articles, his YouTube videos, and I'm convinced, based on what he said, that this is the Ark. And you guys will see the evidence and you can make your own decision. Because it is, I'm not going to lie, it is a bit controversial because some creationists support it, some don't. In fact, I would even say most don't. Wouldn't you even say that?
Yeah, none of the major creation organizations have come out in support for it, but it's controversial.
Yeah.
And as Nathan and I have talked, the major creationist organizations, they tend to stay away from controversial things.
Right. So I think
alone is controversial enough.
They don't want to add to it, so to speak, add to the headache.
So in a sense, it's not surprising, maybe.
Right.
What would be surprising is if we do conclusively have evidence of that age, that old evidence remnants, that so it is amazing if we had
Yeah. And I'll talk about some of those things a little bit later as we go along. We'll start off with some of the older sketches that have been provided either directly or indirectly by eyewitness accounts. They're quite interesting. In fact, before I started doing research for this lecture, I had never seen this drawing before, but this one here is from the 1600s. And there you see the twin mountains of Ararat. This is Greater Ararat, commonly called Mount Ararat, and then that's Lesser Ararat over there. But you see they put the Ark way over here, way near the top, but also on the southern side of Mount Ararat. And that'll come up a bit later as well. It's also interesting, and I had heard this before, but the traditional ancient Persian name for this mountain is the Mountain of Noah. I think we should go back to calling it the Mountain of Noah personally, but that's just me. Here is, some of you have probably heard of this guy, Hagopian. He is, this is a painting by Alfred Lee, but here he is being given a boost by his uncle up to these stairs. Now these stairs are probably post-flood. Someone put these on there after the flood so that people could go on top of it. But here he is getting a boost. He goes up on those stairs and he walked along the top of, according to him, he walked on top of the Ark of Noah. By the way, this artwork is done by a guy named Alfred Lee. We'll see another one of his paintings here in a minute. But they yes. Well, this guy Hagopian, who's at this time he's just a little kid, but later in his life, maybe even many years later, he spoke to Alfred Lee, the artist, and he said, "This is what it looked like. You know, it's up here, it's all by itself. There's all rocks around, there's snow around, and that's what it looked like, and that's what he yeah. So it's not Alfred Lee didn't go up there and paint it, you know. Well, he took it from a description. Yes. Go ahead. Well, that's a good question. In the Bible, it does say that the ark was coated with bitumen on the outside. Also, as you saw in the first sketch, it's way on the top of Mount Ararat, which is basically pretty much frozen the year round. So I'm presuming that's how this has been preserved, because it's up there basically in an icebox. So,
since I missed part of it, long story. What wood do they say it's made out of? Does the Bible say it?
Well, the Bible says it's made of gopher wood, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But apparently, Dr. Klenck, which I mentioned here in a slide or two ago, he believes that gopher wood, when you study it and do all the word things, whatever they do, they get to a Greek word which means cypress, which we would call cypress wood. And when you go up to this site, most of the ark is made out of cypress wood. Pardon me?
Isn't that a favorite cedar?
I honestly don't know. I don't really know.
Same type of wood like Venice, because that wood never deteriorates, but they built Venice on it.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I don't know.
You're supposed to know this.
Yeah, I know I'm supposed to know that, but
Some of it's preserved in salt
yeah,
water there. And this is
right,
preserved
right.
in, ice, so.
What's the bitumen?
Bitumen would be, my understanding is it's like tar. It's like oil when it comes out of the ground. It's something like that. Now, I don't know if you can make bitumen like from tree sap or not, but pitch would be directly from tree sap. But they might make bitumen from tree sap too and maybe concentrate it down a little bit more. I don't know. But we'll see pictures of the outside of the ark, and it's very dark, almost black. In fact, you can see here that's fairly dark.
The pictures I've seen on TV, it's like it's not, doesn't look like that.
It doesn't look like this,
Yeah, no. At least
like that.
like that. It looks like just a shell or just wood scattered.
Hmm.
And I don't know, maybe it's
Well, maybe.
Showing more pictures later.
Well, I'm going to show some more pictures, and over time, see, apparently at this time in history, around the early 1900s, it was still in one piece. But later on, it gets broken in half.
yeah, well that makes more sense.
Yeah.
I mean, it's 100 years ago.
Sure, yeah.
And I wanted to ask you, are you familiar with Dr. Jeremiah Johnson?
I know the name, but I don't. I'm not
He's a
that
recent,
that
he's
familiar with
kind
it.
of, recently been writing books on TV and stuff.
Yeah.
And he's like a historian.
Yeah, sure.
Christian
Yeah.
historian, and he does not believe that that's the ark.
Oh. Hey.
I just was curious.
Yeah, yeah. In fact, I would say a lot of people in Christendom and in creationism would probably disagree with me.
Was he talking about this site though, or some
Yeah.
of the other ones?
He was talking about the Mount Everest.
Okay, all right.
I know there's more than one.
Sure,
site of-
sure.
of, you know,
Yeah,
that looks like potential.
yeah.
But is there more than one on Mount Everest?
Now that I'm not totally sure about that. I'm going to talk about it a little bit, something similar to it a little bit later, but I don't. Well,
Not necessarily.
yeah, I don't necessarily know of other sites necessarily on Mount Ararat,
There's one
but there
down in
could
the
be.
valley,
But there could be. You know.
One in the valley.
Sure.
down in the valley.
Yeah, yeah. Sure. Well, anyway, this is again, this is an artist rendering. This is not a photograph, but the Russians went up there. They sent an expedition up there, a bunch of soldiers. They went up, took pictures, made drawings, made measurements, you know, et cetera, et cetera. And guess what happened when they came back down off the mountain? Well, the Bolshevik revolution occurred, and the report was lost. Now, apparently, there's a guy by the name of Arutanov. He did have one of these pictures from the expedition. He knows what it looks like because he looked at it, but he somehow lost the picture or something like that. But he did describe it to someone, and that's what I think this is here. Someone drew this based on his description. Again, it's not a photograph, and I don't think he drew this, but someone drew this based on what he told them. But that was in the 1916 time frame.
Too far from the other drawing.
It's not that much dissimilar to that one, right? Right. Exactly. Because these you'll see that as you look at them, they're similar. They're up in the mountain. They have sort of a ledge and cliff kind of a area, and it's a square or rectangular, boxy kind of a barge-like looking structure, wooden structure. Here is again, this is Alfred Lee, who painted the painting on the slide before this slide, two slides before. But he spoke with a guy by the name of Ed Davis. He was in the army. He was over there in Turkey. He got to know some of the locals, got friendly with them, and they decided to, as a gift to him, they took him up to see the Ark. Now, and then he described it to Alfred Lee, and Alfred Lee made this painting. Now, I'll just be honest with you. Apparently, this is in the Ahura Gorge, The Ahura Gorge is on the north side of Mount Ararat. The Nami site that I'm going to talk about is on the south side. So I don't know if this could be an answer to what you're saying, asking about, are there two sites,
Because I've seen information on different ones.
Sure. Now, later on, I'm going to talk about Dr. Klenck and how he describes this particular area and what the Armenians have done. But what could be going on is some way, somehow, maybe this guy went up there and he was told that this was the Ahura Gorge when it wasn't, because the guides who took him didn't want him to tell other people so that they would go to the Ark and steal artifacts from it. Now, with that in mind, I mean, I believe that he saw it personally, but take a look at the edges of the Ark. Here it's split in two, but look at this edge here. We know from the Bible that it has 3 levels to it, but these appear to have 3 rooms on each level. So keep that in your mind, because I'm going to mention it again.
John Morris a proponent of this thing? John Morris.
I'm not sure he would have even heard of this site personally.
We talked about Ed Davis.
Oh, well, he would have heard of Ed Davis. Yeah. And that might be, again, I don't. Yeah, I'm an armchair ark finder, and it's possible that a bunch of people went up to the Ahura Gorge, which is supposedly where this is, and they didn't find it. Why? Because it's not there. It's on the other side. I don't know. But I do have a lot of charts to go through, so let me get going. This is a sketch. This guy saw a picture of the Ark, apparently in Stars and Stripes. And wouldn't you know, that particular episode or publication of Stars and Stripes has been lost to history. But anyway, he drew a sketch there, very similar to the other one. Here's another one. This is Ed Bailing. And I don't know if he drew this himself or he talked to someone else and they drew it. But here you have a similar, these two are actually rather similar. There's sort of a cliff here, a ledge, overburden, a cliff here, a ledge, overburden, a rectangular box. So anyway, Dr. Joel Klenck is where I get most of my information from. Not totally. There's another guy by the name of William Phillips. His link is also on that page there. But he's been up to the Ark himself. He talks about the artifacts that have been found both inside and outside. He discusses at length, or at least at length to me, the conflict of that particular area. In fact, I'll go ahead and show it here. This is Turkey and Mount Ararat, way over on the edge. And Armenia is just to the east of it. The Turks and the Armenians have been fighting over that area for thousands of years. But he talks about that conflict. He talks about the Armenians having a sort of, a mindset that we're the protectors of the Ark. So we're not going to let people just willy-nilly go up there. So they'll hide it. They'll deceive people. They'll say, oh, no, it's over there. It's over on that mountain over there. That sort of thing. So that goes on. I'll talk about some of the animal remains. We'll obviously show some pictures. A sketch of what, I don't know who did this sketch, but a sketch of what this particular site, the Nami site, would look like if it was out of the snow and it was all put back together again, at least by the rooms that they know about. And then probably one of the most amazing things that I discovered in looking at his information is apparently there was a book found on Noah's Ark, this particular Ark. Now, he believes that the Ark, both inside and the artifacts that are found inside, he believes that it is somewhere in the 13,000 BC to 9,000 BC time frame as far as its age. I wouldn't believe those numbers. I don't believe those numbers because I believe Noah's flood was about 4,500 years ago or so. Now, the NAMI team, they took some wood off of the Ark, and they got a carbon-14 dated to about 4,800 BC, which is quite a bit younger than what Klenck thinks it is. He believes that sometimes when they grab these pieces, they use their hands without gloves, and so it's very possible that those artifacts or samples were contaminated. So anyway.
Is it true, which gives it more credence, that he's not trying to promote the Christianity through this, right?
Well,
he's not a young Earth, he's not really a creationist or a young Earth.
I don't know exactly what he is. I don't believe he's a young Earth creationist.
Yeah, no, for sure, yeah.
And I think he's a Jewish guy, to be honest. I didn't know for sure, but I finally read something, and he was saying God, but it was G-D. Okay. And I think Jewish people will do that as an act of respect for the name of God. So I think he's a Jewish guy. And in his writings, I won't talk about it much. I won't talk about it at all, but he talks about the Ark being consistent with Christianity, with Hebrew scripture, and with the Quran. So he's trying to, and then I think he's using these secular dates to try and get the secular people sort of all on board. I don't believe that, but that's what he's doing, and that's all right as long as he gives us all the information, and then we can make up our own mind. Let's keep going here. Here is where the NAMI team Ark is. This is on the southern slope of Greater Ararat. It's in pieces, at least two. So one of them is around 13,000 feet. The other one's around 15,000 feet. Now, there are some creationist geologists. In fact, I emailed one of them just a week or two ago, that believe that Mount Ararat, and of course that would include Lesser Ararat as well, that they are post-flood mountains. With that in mind, the Ark couldn't have landed there because it didn't exist at the end of the flood. That's their analysis. Now, there are other creationist geologists, I think, who would disagree with that. John Morris would be one of them, I would presume. Oh, yeah. Otherwise, he wouldn't go up there. Right, he went there. Right. But when you go watch their video, this would be the NAMI video, they spend a lot of time telling you how arduous it is to get up to the Ark site. But I'm only just going to show you one slide here, but it is very difficult to get to. You can see how steep the slope is, and it takes, once you get, I'm sort of estimating, but once you step out of the Land Rover, which gets you near, it takes about 3 days to get up to the Ark. Once you get there, you've got to climb down into these caves. Sometimes you can just climb down on your own. Other times, you've got to get harnessed up and you've got to rappel down with ropes. Now, over the years, when people have gone up there, and the Armenians, by the way, in the early 1900s, I forget what was happening politically and historically, but at some point they said to themselves, we need to go up there and take artifacts out before other people steal them. So in the early 1900s or late 1800s, they took a lot of artifacts from the Ark. Anyway, this is something from inside the Ark, and then I'm going to show you some other artifacts that come from outside the Ark. This is a mortar, by the way. You would use it, you'd sit on the ground and you'd put some seeds on top of it or beans on top of it and smash them with a pestle. That one there is made out of wood. It has a certain amount of pitch left on it. There's a grinding stone. There is this is a basket made out of palm leaves, dried palm leaves. Typically, the artifacts from inside the Ark, they tend to be pretty utilitarian. You know, they're just made for what they do. There's nothing fancy about them. Especially this one here. This is this sort of a wood scoop. It's a wooden scoop. It's smeared with clay on the outside. I believe they did that to make it waterproof, to try and make it more waterproof. They find rope. Certainly you would need lots of rope if you're dealing with animals to guide them, make lassos that you would use them to guide around. There are bowls that they find. Here are some in situ, as you would say, actually in the ark. Here's one that's been taken off. Some of them are stone, some of them are wood. They find cloth. This one here is made out of wool. This is a stone thought to be used as a lid for a cistern. The cistern probably full of water, and they coat it to make it seal better when they flip it over on top of the cistern to seal it. This is just a regular wooden bucket, nothing too fancy. Another bucket here with salt in it. Here's another cover, another stone cover with sealant on it, used to cover up a cistern, again probably full of water, but I suppose it could have been filled with grape juice or something like that as well. Here is a leather rope or a leather leash used to move larger animals around. Now, a lot of the things they find on the ark tend to be, like I said, utilitarian, sort of crude even. Now, this item here is part of a fruit press. This is a little bit more sophisticated. The Armenians have taken artifacts off of the ark, and apparently, according to Dr. Klenck, a lot of them go to Georgia. And I'm not sure, I mean, he didn't say, I'm not sure where they go, probably into private hands, unfortunately. He has never mentioned that there's a museum in Georgia where you can go to see these. So I think a lot of them, unfortunately, are in private hands. But well, actually making it up there, I mean, I mentioned some of them here. As far as I know, other than those, well, let me get big first. Over the last 150 years, about 43 people have seen the ark. Now, some of those people flew around Mount Ararat and saw it, looking down at it. But I would say of those 43, you know, maybe half of them actually went up to it. And when I say going up to it, even some of the Ed Davis, he went up there. He didn't actually go to it. He could just go up there and see it. He didn't go over there and climb around it like Hagopian did. So not that many people actually get to it. Yeah. I know there has been, when you read about these people going up there, the people that they go with, they tell them you cannot take photographs. So I do know that happens. You know, you can't be taking photographs. You can look, but no photographs. So I think that's part of the reason. Now, supposedly there's photographs taken from satellites and even from spy planes, but those photographs are classified. You know, at least they used to be, because we were at war at somewhere, or this is a sensitive area because it's near Russia, you know, the border of Russia. So there's those kinds of issues. Here is a sort of sophisticated pulley mechanism.
I'm sorry, so where did these photos come from? These artifacts that when they're taken out of the ark, they went to find.
Now, I'm presuming that these artifacts, or these pictures, excuse me, are taken on the ark. So they take the photograph and they leave the artifact there on the ark. That's what I'm presuming. Well, the ones that have a black background, like they're sitting on a table, those are probably in private hands somewhere. A lot of them, according to him, are in Georgia, the country of Georgia, which is just north of the Ararat area, just north of Armenia.
So it's somebody's word that they came from.
Well, that's partially true. That is correct. And so, you sort of have to balance that issue, which you're absolutely right.
And artifacts are left in the now the visual things
That nobody else wanted. Yeah. Right. 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 Yeah, I mean, there's that aspect as well. All the good stuff Noah would have taken himself, and if there was any good stuff left, looters would have taken it. So what we have is sort of the leftover. Here's like a comb or a brush. I think this is made out of perhaps bone. That was maybe a little bit more sophisticated than some of the other things. But on the outside of the ark, which is also kind of interesting, not something I would have realized, until I did the research, is people used to go after the flood ended. People used to go up there and worship at the ark. It was a place of worship now. Now this is the outer or an outer section of the wall of the ark, and it is covered with bitumen, and it's, as you can see, it's very dark. This little cubbyhole here, I believe, is thought to be a later cubbyhole for people to go there and quote unquote worship. They can see inside the ark, and they would leave offerings. This on the outside would be bitumen, as you mentioned. Here is what's thought to be one of the oldest artifacts that was left as part of a offering. Again, he has dates from 9,000 BC to maybe 6,000 BC or so. I don't personally agree with them, but I don't doubt that they're very old. Here's another one. This is a piece of pottery, sort of a crudish piece of pottery, a little younger. Here's another piece, one that looks a little more sophisticated, if you will. This one might have even though I can't really tell for sure, this might have even been thrown on a wheel. Not sure though. Here is a little pitcher, even more sophisticated. This one looks like it might have been thrown on a wheel and then tapered up here to make a spout, and then a handle was added. Here's another piece which looks even better. Again, this looks like it was thrown on a wheel to me, but it's also newer, as you can see there. And then about 100 years ago, this was left there. Again, a finer piece of pottery. It even has a design on it. It's got obviously a thrown piece. It may have even been thrown in two different parts. But people would go up there and they would leave milk or wine or seeds or other grain offerings as part of their worship, either of God or their worship of Noah. Because later on, and I'll talk about this a little bit later on, for instance, the Mesopotamians, they worship Noah as a god. So did the Greeks, so did the Egyptians. Animal remains in the ark. One thing that's kind of interesting, you would expect to find feathers because Noah did bring birds onto the ark. But one thing I realized after doing some research is that in Genesis 7, chapter 7, verse 3, Noah took 7 pairs of every kind of birds onto the ark. And I was just thinking in my mind, oh no, he only brought 2, but he actually brought 7. I had forgotten that. Well, I read it and I was kind of like, oh, well, these are 7 of the clean birds. But when I read it, I couldn't tell whether it was that or not. It looked like it could be, but you'd have to read it. Genesis chapter 7, verse 3 to see that. But anyway, I mean, that's a lot of, if it's all the birds, it's a lot of birds. And so you would certainly expect to find feathers. which we'll see a picture of. Animal feces you'd expect to see. Also, again, something I wouldn't have thought of, but cobwebs. Noah's Ark is basically one big, huge barn. And I don't know how many of you guys have been to a barn. I've been to a barn, and there are cobwebs all over the place. So it's interesting. This Ark site has cobwebs in it. And there's also some shed skin from snakes. And I think he said there was also some shed skins from like tarantulas and scorpions. So anyway, but here this is supposed to be, you know, I can't really see it very well, but this is supposed to be animal feces. I'll take his word for it, at least for now. There's a feather that was found there. Fur has been found there. And of course, plenty of mammals would have to have been taken onto the Ark. Cobwebs are found on the Ark. You can also see sort of the pitch that's coating on the wood there. Here are some photos. This is an inner chamber that has on the ground, on the floor, it has like chickpeas or other grains on the floor. The boards have been set up and placed around, and they've been smeared with clay. The thinking is that that helps to preserve the grain that was in there. This would have been filled with grain at the beginning of the Ark. That's the thinking of it. But they found chickpeas. They found another kind of pea called a bitter-vetch, which I've never heard of, some undomesticated cereal grains, and things like that. Now, in order to take this picture, the explorers had to actually rappel down into this particular room. Here's another area here. One thing that this shows, which I think is pretty amazing, is if this is truly Noah's Ark, they're making some pretty amazing, or Noah and his family, or at least his contractors, are making some pretty nice pieces of board, because boards are not easy to make with hand tools. I theorize that they must have used some sort of mechanical device, either hand-powered or horse-powered or something like that, to make these boards. Some of these boards, they found boards in the Ark or in like a debris field next to the Ark. Some of them are 20 meters long. So some of them are huge, just absolutely huge. I think I mentioned it before, but in the Bible it talks about gopher wood. Well, Dr. Klenck relates that back to Cyprus. Now, there are also some oak wood and some teak wood on this site, or at this site. Here's a crossbeam, which is used to maintain the structure of the Ark. Here is a crossbeam as it sticks into the next wall over. You can see it looks like it's somehow bound here to provide structure on the other side and throughout the Ark. One thing that's also very interesting is you have these boards. This would be in the bottom of the Ark of the site here. And behind them, you can barely see one here, maybe a little bit over there, there are rocks in there, fairly large rocks, maybe the size of a soccer ball or something like that. What are they doing behind these boards on either side of either corner of the Ark? They would be there for ballast. It's believed that that's why they are there. And they are made out of sedimentary style rock. If you go outside the Ark, all of that is volcanic rock. It's basaltic rock. So it's completely different rock. Well, what's it doing here, 15,000 feet up Mount Ararat? Another, I think, really interesting find is this would be the outer wall. The outer walls also have a tendency to slope slightly from top to bottom. A barge and boats, they also slope slightly from top to bottom. And each of these squares has either some sort of crustacean or a barnacle. What are barnacles doing at 15,000 feet? They don't walk up there, I'm pretty sure. We've seen some sophisticated boardwork already and carpentry work, but here's some close-ups of mortise and tenon. Here's some drilled holes here. There's a mortise over there. But it's pretty sophisticated woodwork. There's some peg over there. Yes, inside. Yeah, that's it. Well, that's a good question. When some of the people in this century, people were allowed to go into the ark and take pictures. Now, if you're outside of the ark now, this particular site, you could be standing real close to it and not even see it because it's all buried now. I guess I forgot to mention that. Most of the ark is buried. I guess I did mention you do have to go down in the caves to get to it. In the past, it was more in the open. And the people who took you up there said, don't take pictures because we don't want you showing this to the world so that other people will go and find it and take stuff out of it. Now, why is this guy allowing people to go in there, take pictures? I think partly it might be just for money. You know, the guy wants money, and he knows where it is, so I'll make some money. Part of it might be because if people don't go in there and study it, it's going to become buried, and you cannot go in there anymore. I mean, I showed the buried from rocks and snow, and they call it scree, but it's gravel basically coming down off the mountain. When you are up there, you'll usually see a rock come tumbling down, and hopefully it won't hit you. It's a very dangerous area, and this thing keeps getting buried and more buried and more buried. So eventually you won't be, unless you do a lot of digging, eventually you will not be able to see it. So that is a good question, but in the past it was more in the open, and the.
How come so long in the past it was in the open, and you see all of a sudden it's getting buried?
It's just nature is the only thing I can. It's snowfall, and there was also a volcanic event. Yeah, there was a volcanic event that occurred in the 1800s, and that also may have caused it to loosen up a little bit below it. Even though it was seen at the surface in the 1900s, it might have been a little closer to the top of that gorge, which I'm actually going to talk about here in a minute. Something that's interesting is when you're in the ark, you can look up and you can see a floor above you, but you can also see down through cracks and see a floor below you. So it is truly a lot of times it is a 3-level wooden structure. What's it doing up there at 15,000 feet? You know, they also find, it's not easy to see, but this is a log, and that log has cuts in it like this. So when you lean it up against the wall, it's got cuts in it, and you can use that as stairs. And these logs are found with stairs in them. They're found throughout the ark, similar to what the staircases you would find on a cruise ship or something like that, or on a barge. One of them goes up to a ceiling, and there's a door there, but it's jammed. And the people who take you up there won't let you try and pry it open. But at some point, hopefully someone will pry that door open. I forgot to mention, but in one of those grain bins, there's also a door just leading off to the side. That door was also jammed as well. But it would be nice if someone took tools up there and opened up that door so they could see what's on the other side. Another thing this is another of the storage bins for seeds. This one apparently has chutes on it, so they could have filled the storage bin without, sort of using buckets, or they could fill it from over to the side and it would shoot down into it. Here is what Dr. Klenck would call typical maritime furniture. On a boat, you don't have tables that just sit here or chairs like you're sitting on now, because when the sea gets rough, the level goes back and forth. These things would just slide around. Well, on this barge, on this wooden barge, you'll have platforms, you have benches, you have headrests, what appear to be a headrest, and they're all tied to the floor or to the wall so they won't slide around. This here is a sketch of the ark, what someone, it's not to scale or anything, what someone believes the whole thing would look like if it was put together. And you can see the rooms that they went into. There's one of the storage rooms for the bitter-vetch and the chickpeas and so forth. This is another one of them. In the Bible, the ark was 300 cubits long, 50 cubits wide, and 30 cubits high. That equates to about 152 meters long, 25 meters wide, and 15 meters high. Dr. Klenck estimates that this barge, this wooden barge that is up there, I'm not sure how he does it, but he estimates that it's about 158 meters long, which is very similar to the number we get from the Bible when we convert, because we don't really know what a cubit is. In this case, they used a 20-inch cubit, but it might have been a little different. We don't know. But it does get us to a similar number as to the dimension of this ark that's up here on Mount Ararat. At least I believe it's up there. This, I think, is to me, it's earth-shattering, but apparently no one cares. I don't know. I don't know what to say. But a book has been found on the ark, at least according to Dr. Klenck. It has pages to it, but only some of the pages can be opened because the other ones are stuck together. And of course, you don't want to force them apart. Well, anyway, of the pages you can see two of them here. On the right, and by the way, he reads these ancient Hebrew letters. You can see them here. They're difficult to see, and it's hard to believe that people can read them, but apparently people can. But on the right there, apparently it says they assembled, here is where the living are, or this is the edge of living, your goodness, and a mediator. Now, he doesn't explain what he thinks they're trying to say here. My guess is they're more or less saying, hey, look, we made it. We're living. We're still alive after the flood, excuse me. But it was your goodness from God, your mediation that saved us. That's kind of how I interpret it. On this page here on the left, the lettering says the end of unripe figs and the end of where you will dwell. End could also be sort of like a word for completion. It's the end. It's been completed, and here you will dwell. Well, when the ark landed and you step out of the ark and you're looking south, you see a mountain range. Here is sort of a picture of it. We're on the north side here. You would be on the opposite side. As you look south, you would see all these mountains in the distance. So that is what Dr. Klenck believes that this drawing is of, mountains in the past, in the distance there, and the camel is there to represent. We're going to use camels and other pack animals to get down to this area where we're going to live. The book was made of animal skin. Yeah, animal skin. I should have mentioned that, but anyway. Here are some more. I did a lecture going back maybe 10 years been a long time, called Ararat Archaeology and Anthropology, and I talk about other signs, other messages that had been left in that area, typically on rocks or on shards, pottery shards. And a guy by the name of Dr. William Shea, he did the work and he came up with an alphabet. His alphabet that I talked about, again, 10 years ago, I think, I don't know. By the way, you can go to our website and you can look at that, my notes on our website if you want, and you can see that. But these pictures, these drawings, along with the lettering, is consistent with what I saw in these other artifacts that I lectured on, 10 years ago, that were found in the area of Mount Ararat, correct. Actually, some of them were found near Durpanar. I don't know if you know Durpanar. Durpanar is thought to be another Ark site. I believe it's a geological site, but it is near Mount Ararat. When you're at the Durpanar site, you can see Mount Ararat in the distance, but they find pottery shards in that area. And some of them appear to have pictures of Noah on it, and it'll say Noah, it'll say his name on it in ancient Hebrew, a similar alphabet to these letters here. Now you can't really see them very well, and you can't see the sketch here, but apparently right up here in this area, there's a sort of a U shape drawn, and that is thought to be the top of the gorge that the Ark originally landed on. In fact, here it is over here. There's supposed to be an X here. It's hard to see, but this is Mount Ararat, Greater Ararat, I should say. And there's...
I thought it was a bug.
It does look like a bug. But you can see these two lines here, and you can see a V here. And that appears to be a sketch of that gorge, at the top of which is Noah's Ark. And that apparently is what this is showing. This is more of a close-up of it. This sketch, and you can see letters around it. On that left side, it says, "As there is a fire, command a sacrificial feast," which reminds me, right, of Genesis 8:20. After Noah's flood, Noah sacrificed, right? Oh, and it also says of a lamb. Command a sacrificial feast of a lamb. Now, what's also interesting about these letters is there are apparently numbers there as well. You can use Hebrew letters to make numbers. One number is 7,112. The other number is 39,000. Dr. Klenck believes that the 7,112 number is the number of clean animals that were on the ark. The 39,035 number is thought to be the total number of animals on the ark. And we talked earlier about, well, why doesn't AIG support this? Well, they have a display at their ark, and they have clean animals as being about 1,400. This number here is 7,000. Is that why maybe they don't support this? I don't know. There's a difference. And they believe, AIG, they did their calculation, and they believe that there were only 6,000, well, about 7,000 animals total on the ark. This number here would say, if Klenck is correct, he would say there was about 40,000. So is that a reason why they don't support it? I don't know. I'm kind of guessing. Yeah, they are in the same ballpark. I mean, they're not way off by hundreds. But I wanted to, as I'm going through this, I'm thinking, well, is this really the ark? So I made a list of the reasons why I thought it was the ark. You can sort of look through it yourself. But the barnacles I thought was pretty amazing. proof positive of it being the ark, sort of the bitumen on the outside, pitch on the inside. The other one is the book. If that book truly is what he says it is, how can it be something else? How can it possibly be something else? Now, more work needs to be done on all of these, more carbon dating and things like that, I'm sure, need to be done. But, you know, the angled outside wall, if you're building a barn up there, why would you make the outside angled like that? That makes no sense.
The thing is, when you say feathers, species,
Oops.
would other animals have got up there and been there, like goats or something? I mean, does anything live up there?
Oh no, not where this site is. No. It,
Other animals wouldn't walk in.
oh no, you wouldn't have no. You wouldn't have any wandering animals going up there. No. Excuse me? Oh no. This is well above the snow line. Even when the snow cuts back, it's well above it. I suppose I should know where the snow line is, but when you, I suppose on that picture I showed you before of Mount Ararat, looking down at it, you can see how much of the mountain is covered with snow. So anything above the snow line is just uninhabitable. No animal would want to go up there.
Sightings of it over the years, the sketches
Yeah,
totally,
sure.
depending on
Yeah,
years where
yeah.
much less snowfall.
Sure.
Snow melt.
Yeah. The Hogopian site, the uncle recognized that there had been a drought for a couple of years. So he's like, well, it's been hot. While we can, let's go up and see it, because when there's more rain and snow, you can't see it because it's buried in snow, at least at that time. Now, I showed you the picture of the book, which is kind of interesting because, and that ends my Ark section of my lecture. However, I gave two lectures actually about Mesopotamian mythology. And from the last time I gave one of those lectures and now, I found another cylinder seal. And this is the artwork of that cylinder seal. So I know I'm whipsawing here. But now we're going into Mesopotamian mythology. And I believe that these two bumps right there, those are the twin mountains of Ararat. If you have questions or you want to know more, go to my lecture about Mesopotamian mythology. This is Utu or Shamash. This is their remembrance, I believe, of Noah. There's other things going on here, but it's not important for what I wanted to mention. But this is a newer cylinder seal that I found. And if you look at Noah, what does he have in his right hand? Underneath his right hand? 10 Commandments. Does he have the 10 Commandments underneath his arm? No. But he does have what appears to be Charlton Heston. He either has a book or he has a tablet underneath his arm. That's what I think. And I saw that and I was like, wow. I mean, that's cool because that dovetails right back into this book on the Ark. It dovetails right back into the question of whether or not Noah and his family knew how to read and write. Another reason, and here he is stepping on top of Mount Ararat, because that's where the Ark landed, and he has a wood saw in his left hand. That would be a saw with the teeth that wood saws have. No, I think it's a saw. If you see better versions of it, you'll see it's a saw with teeth. Yeah, similar. Yep. In my other lecture, I showed this cylinder seal, and I said, this guy is Noah, this is Noah, this is Noah, that is Noah. The guy on the right is Noah. And I was thinking to myself, I'm just telling you what I think these people are. I'd like to have a little bit more evidence to show that they're Noah. Well, as I did more investigating, and this, by the way, is Utu, or Shamash, this guy here, and he has, you can see the teeth on the saw here a little bit better. Anyway, he's coming up through the ground, coming up to Mount Ararat. But how can I show that those guys are Noah a little bit better? Well, I ended up finding another god named Nannar, probably one of their lesser known gods. Shamash is over there. He was the guy I just showed you. And then here is Enki. A lot of you might have heard of Enki when you hear about or read about Mesopotamian mythology. Yeah, no? All right, well, he's one of the more famous ones. Well, what do we have here? What are they doing? They're sitting on a box with 3 levels, 3 rooms on each level. Remember when we saw that picture that Ed Davis described to Alfred Lee and he painted it? We have the same kind of iconography. There were, on that painting, there were 3 levels and there were 3 rooms on each level. I believe the Mesopotamians remember that. And that is why they show the different remembrances of Noah as sitting on the ark. Now, these other guys, I believe, are also Noah. This is Ouanna. In Greek mythology, Nereus, who is Noah, he is shown as half man, half fish. And I'm going to show in a little bit Vishnu, who is a Hindu god. He is also one of his incarnations, one of his avatars is half man, half fish. So that's why I think this guy is Noah. This is Ninurta. They show him on the previous cylinder seal as, I believe, living in the pre-flood world. The pre-flood world was violent, and that's why he's got a bow and arrow. That's why he has a club at his side. And it's also why it looks like a lion is about ready to eat him. So that's how they're picturing him in the pre-flood world, the violent world. Here's Marduk. Noah brought animals from the old world into the new world. He would have brought dinosaurs. He would have brought large, or at least animals that end up becoming large, lizard-like creatures and reptiles from the old world into the new world. I believe he brought dinosaurs into the new world as well. They didn't do that well in the new world, but he did bring them in. He has the circle and this stick in his hand, the circle being a loop of rope. Noah used rope, and we saw the ropes on the ark, but he used rope to lasso the animals and help corral the animals and steer the animals onto the ark or bring them back off again. The stick there, I believe, is a scroll, another reference to the fact that Noah brought a library from the old world into the new world, in my opinion. He also has like these star charts on his arm here. I believe that Noah would have been an expert at reading the stars. In one of my other lectures, I'm not sure which one this is, but I talk about Karahunj, and it is an ancient megalithic site that has to do with establishing the calendar. That would have been one thing that Noah would have wanted to do after the flood, is establish a calendar. And so he would know the movements of the stars. He could do that. This is Isimud. And I don't know if can you guys see it? He's got a face pointing backwards and to the right, left and to the right, 2 faces. Why is that? Why would Noah be pictured that way? I believe it's because in the new world, if you wanted to know something about the old world, you would ask Noah. He would be an expert on what happened in the old world. He would also be probably the smartest guy to have ever lived post-flood. So if you wanted to know how to dig a well, build a dam, grow crops, manage animals, he would be the guy to go to. If you wanted to talk to someone, about an issue, especially a moral issue, you would go to Noah because he was a righteous man. So here he is looking to the future. He's the guy to help you. manage cities, manage towns, manage farming, manage people into the future.
This is Mesopotamia.
Yes.
So how old is, and they trace, this is one of my questions, is civilization began.
Sure.
All of civilization.
Sure.
It began, Noah and the people on the ark.
Right.
Is that proven?
Well, I don't know if it, yeah. If you look at their artwork and also some of their writings, they do indicate that they come from the north, from the Ararat region.
So is Mesopotamia the oldest civilization?
I would certainly say it's probably the oldest, one of the oldest.
Because then Noah would have contemporary. They would have known.
Well, early Mesopotamia, yes, that's correct. Yeah.
So he would have been the father.
Sure, yeah. And in fact, in their literature, they believe that there were certain cities where these gods lived. And so it's very possible that Noah lived in that area, or he visited them, and they said, oh, he lives here, because, people want to brag about themselves, about their city.
Passed down.
Sure, yeah.
How long did Noah live?
In the New World, he lived another 350 years. Yeah.
Civilizations that are like,
Yeah.
like so many.
Sure. So he didn't live forever, but he outlived some of his grandchildren, and that might be one of the reasons why they deified him, because he was living so long. As other people were dying off, and yet he's still living. Anyway,
He was like 500 years old when he
when he started, he was 500 years old. When they got on the ark, he was 600 years old. It was about it. Yeah, just getting started. Anyway, to whiplash again, we're going to go from Mesopotamian area. We're going to go all the way here to New Jersey, and we'll talk about the Lenape, or red record, or the Wallam Olam. These are scans from David McCutcheon's book on the Wallam Olam, or the red record. This is the early part of their history. The Wallam Olam is their history. It spans thousands of years, but it's also very distinct. It's very distilled. It doesn't go on and on and on like the Bible does. No offense to the Bible. But this is the early part of it. And here is a verse that says, at first, forever, lost in space, everywhere, the great Manito was. Of course, that would be their name for God. And then up later on in verse 9, according to David McCutcheon, and I'm going to comment on that in a second, anew spoke the great Manito. And then later on, he says, the great Manito, a Manito, two Manitos, which appears to be a reference to more than one God, or some sort of pluralism going on here. And then later it says, he gave the first mother, he gave the first fish. So it goes from he, a singular God, to a reference to plural gods, or some concept thereof. And then, of course, you see the pictograph here. You can see the pictographs going down. This is the Manito here. This one has compass points on it, but sometimes they'll show that as a circle, a Manito as a circle with a dot in the middle. In fact, here it shows a Manito with a circle and a dot. In the Bible, we have what? We have in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. But later on, it says, let us go down and make man. So there's this duality, plural or singular. And God said, let there be light, right? So that is a singular point of view. Well, anyway, I was listening to this guy on YouTube after I'd done my lecture before, and he made I think, a wonderful insight. His name is Injuvi. Again, verse 9, this pictograph here, and you'll notice there's 3 Manitos there. Just like we can ascertain from the book of Genesis, the Spirit of God hovered over the face of the great deep. God created, and God said to Eve, your seed will crush the head of the serpent. Only God can do that. And I believe, Injuvi believes, that the Lenape also remembered that. And he interprets this. He's an expert in Native American languages and also in the Red Record. And he retranslates this as, again, the 3 creator spirits. The 3 creator spirits, Kichi Manito, spoke and created. So they remembered that God spoke, like the Bible says, and they remember that God there's a threesome about God. They remembered it. It's in the Bible. No one else, as far as I know, remembers that. And I thought that was just absolutely amazing. Yes, go ahead.
I named my cat Kitchi with an I.
Oh.
When I was saying, I was looking for a Native American name.
Oh. Okay.
It's Algonquin Indian name that means brave warrior.
Okay, it might be related.
Could be, that is
yeah. Yeah. So anyway, it blew me away. I mean, this document to me is amazing. Everybody should know about it. Of course, nobody knows about it, but anyway. Well, let's jump around again. Now let's go to Hindu mythology. I was surprised to find out that Hinduism is the 3rd largest religion in the world. I did not know that. I didn't realize it was so large. But as you can see here, it's a collection of myths and legends. It dates back to approximately, in its early years, to approximately 2000 BC. I'll show you where the Indus River is here in a second, but it's thought to have started there. You have some basic beliefs there, samsara, karma, all living things have a soul. But the basics of Hindu mythology can be found in the 4 Vedas. I'm not going to try and read those. I can say Rig Veda, but the other ones I can't say as well. I think we do have an expert who could say them for us, maybe afterwards. And then there's 4 major denominations. They have a creator, which is Brahma. And what's interesting about Brahma? He has 4 heads. What else has 4 heads from the Bible? Well, the cherubim has 4 heads. I believe, sort of in a, as things get passed down by word of mouth. Oh, by the way, maybe I should have said that. Yes, I should have said that on my previous slide. They recognize that these 4 Vedas were going backwards. They were passed down by word of mouth, and then they were placed in these documents, probably at a time when they went from not having a written language to having. Someone invented it, and everybody's like, hey, let's write these down. But at that time, the history of Genesis, or the history that they knew, had been passed down by word of mouth. So as the description of the cherubim gets passed down, it's not hard to believe that it gets passed down like that, at least in this case. Now, he is the creator of the universe, or from him the universe came. It's interesting because he marries Saraswati. Did I get that right? Saraswati? And they have Manu, and Manu marries Shatarupa or Ananti. And it's interesting because Manu and Shatarupa may be siblings in their remembrance of the story. Who else were siblings and they got married? Adam and Eve were siblings. I would consider Adam and Eve to be siblings. Who else were siblings? Also, Zeus and Hera were siblings, and they were married in Greek mythology. I believe that this is a remembrance. It's just one of those things that that did get remembered as they told the story down through history. Now at the bottom there, I read an article, and they said, well, they might actually have 300 million gods in their mythology, but I'm not so sure that's true. I was watching another lady on YouTube, Hindu lady, and she was like, no, there's really only 33 of them. There is a reference to it. Maybe Babid can explain it a little better than I can. I don't remember the actual reason, but there's probably only 33 or so, not millions of millions. Did I more or less get that right? Oh, so there could be, of those 33, there could be 330 million. Oh, wow. But that is that kind of sort of hypothetical though, really?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. But anyway, I'm going to show sort of iconography similar to this in a slide or two. But here you have, or at least from the article I read, here are some noteworthy deities. I'm not going to read through them all, but I'm going to talk about Vishnu a little bit. Now, Vishnu has 10 incarnations, and in Hindu mythology, these incarnations happen on a timeline. One incarnates, then the next one, you have another incarnation or an avatar, and then the next one. It's sort of funny. In Mesopotamian mythology, they remember Noah in different ways, but they just have them running around all at the same time. So it's kind of a sort of a curveball, if you will, or just a different way of looking at it. And that's just how the Hindus remembered Vishnu. One of the avatars of Vishnu is Matsya, and another one is Kurma, and there's 8 more, which I won't talk about. I won't talk about these guys either. But anyway, speaking of Vishnu, here's an artist's rendering of Matsya, or Vishnu, as the fishman. And you can see they represent him as half fish, half man, just like Oannes that I showed you on that previous slide, which was Mesopotamian mythology. Here we have Greek mythology, or an artist's rendering of Nereus. I believe that is Noah. In Greek mythology, sometimes they show him as half man, half fish. I believe they're talking about the same person of history. Now, Vishnu, Vish means of the water, and Nu, I believe, is a variant of Noah. So it's Noah of the water. So what do they do? Of the water, what is in the water? Fish are in the water. Same way with Greek mythology, they refer to Noah as the old man of the sea. Why? Because he brought mankind through Noah's flood. Similar thing here. They remember that Vishnu brought mankind through the flood. Oh, this guy here? I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I mean, there's sort of a lot going on. He has a mace in his hand, which I'll mention a little bit later. Another version of Vishnu also has a mace in his hand. But it's interesting because they have a flood story, and Manu was directed to build a boat and put his precious things on there so that they would survive the flood. And of course, at the end of the flood, in their version, the Ark lands in the Himalayas. My ancestry is Welsh, Dwyfan and Dwyfach. They build an ark, but their ark lands in Great Britain. So they all have these cultural insights that end up causing the story to be inaccurate, but you understand it. You understand what's going on. Another avatar of Vishnu is Kurma, and he is half human, half turtle. And in Native American mythology, the turtle is greatly associated with Noah's flood, or with a flood. In the red record, Nanabush is the Noah hero in the red record. Of course, that's Noah. And at one point, he's riding on the turtle. In fact, this is verse 8 of the red record. And it says, Nanabush, the strong one, grandfather of all beings, which makes sense because Noah is our grandfather of men, was on Turtle Island. So here we have again, they're remembering the same story, the same event, and they're both using that turtle iconography.
A lot of Native American powwows, and a lot of the Native Americans, they consider the turtle Mother Earth. Mother.
Well, yeah, because it came up after the flood and brought life back to being, if you will. And of course, we live off of Mother Earth. You know, from their point of view, we live off of the animals and plants that Mother Earth provides. So it makes perfect sense. When I was doing my research, I came across this artwork here. This guy at the bottom is Garuda. He's the guy with the wings, and that's Vishnu riding on top. And I thought, this reminds me directly of the Faravahar. Has anybody ever heard of the Faravahar before? Well, it is a symbol of Zoroastrianism, but Faravahars are found in Mesopotamian mythology. They're found in Egyptian mythology, and I guess it's just the two. But what is going on here? What's the symbolism going on? Both Vishnu has a loop in his hand, just like this guy here has a loop in his hand. Who is that? That's Noah. We know this is, I believe this is Vishnu. This is Noah over here too. He has the same loop as a loop of rope that he used to manage the animals with. Now on this piece of artwork, Greek artwork, this is Noah, and he has a staff. Vishnu over here has a mace. Vishnu here has a mace. He's kind of a small one. But the staff and the mace, what is that? Why are they carrying that? Well, they are being shown as having authority. That staff gives them authority, or it's a symbol of authority. Same with the mace. It's a symbol of authority, and they recognize Noah's greatness. This is Noah coming through the old world into the new world. This circle is the earth, and the earth hangs upon nothing. I believe Noah would have known that. Why? Because Job knew that. In Job 26:7, it says, He, God, spreads out the northern skies over empty space. He suspends the earth over nothing. So Noah knew, and of course, he probably would have told other people. So the ancient Mesopotamians, the ancient Hindus, maybe would have said, oh, well, he flies in the air. This is Earth flying in the air. Now, they don't have the circle in this iconography, but they have Noah. They have the loop. This guy has the mace, which is a symbol of authority. But there's also these two little things coming out here. This one doesn't show it totally properly, but when you see other Faravahars, these two little legs here are actually serpents coming out of what I would call the earth. Those serpents represent the memory of the serpent from the Garden of Eden. As the story got passed down, many times the serpent, at least partially, became deified because he helped mankind become smarter. He is the one who tempted Adam and Eve to take from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, which in their mind was a good thing. It made them smarter. It made them wise. Well, why do I mention that? Well, you're not going to be able to see it from where you are, but if you look very closely here, and if you look at other artistic renderings of Garuda, you'll see serpent iconography on him. In this case, it's right on his forehead. Why is it there? I think it's there for the same reason, because they're deifying the serpent of the Garden of Eden. I'm not going to try and pronounce that temple. Anybody want to try and pronounce that temple? It's something Swara. But here we have India. Here's where the temple is. Excellent. That's exactly how I would have said it if I could. The Indus Valley, by the way, which was thought to be where Hinduism started in the early days, in the ancient times, I believe is right in this area here. Of course, we have Israel over here. We have Turkey. I showed you the map of Turkey before. Ararat is right there. Here we have Egypt. There we have Greece up here. Excuse me? Mesopotamia, I'm sorry, I should have pointed that out. Mesopotamia would be right in this area here. Yeah, sorry about that. Thank you. All right, well, at that temple, this is, my understanding is that it is a temple to Shiva. And when you go through this entrance, you can see these two guys, one on each side. I don't know if I'd want to meet them in a dark alley, right? But these are called Nandis. In the Bible, we read that there are cherubim that guarded the entrance to the Garden of Eden. These are Nandis, and I believe that these are a remembrance of that. Now, there is, in these two statues, there is, just like with the cherubim has at least one head with a bull on it, a bull head on it. He also has like bovine feet, the cherubim, that is. Can you see the bull artwork on these two figures?
Yeah.
Can you? Yeah. Yep, right in the chest, right in the chest. It's not necessarily very easy to see. And it's kind of interesting when you watch. I get some of this information from Pravi and Moyim. He talks about how the artists were really clever about hiding things and doing things. It's really very interesting. Here is a closer version of one of them. Can everybody see the bull figure now? Yeah. Can you see it? His eyes are right here. There's his snout right there instead of the belly button. And then here, I'm pointing it out a little bit better. You got the horns on each side. But I thought that was pretty cool. But I believe just as these two Nandis are guarding this entrance, it is their remembrance of the cherubim. Now, not all Nandi, they don't portray all Nandis the same way. Here is another Nandi. This is a close-up of his face. And at this point, he just has what looks like to be a regular human face. But as I pull back, you'll see his chin is the snout of a bull, and he's got big ears like a bull does.
That's like Baal.
Is Baal a bull?
Yes.
Oh.
And his son,
yeah.
Dagon,
okay.
was a fisherman.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah. Well, anyway, what I believe is going on is you have a remembrance of the cherubim here in Hinduism. They remember this for many, many years, hundreds of years, maybe even thousands of years. And finally, when they get to make artwork about it, here's the same statue, but from the side. Here he looks mostly like a bull. but you can see he's got the face of a human mixed in there with the face of the bull. But very similar to the cherubim. Cherubim has a bull head, the Nandi has a bull head. The cherubim has the face of a human, the Nandi has a face of a human. So to kind of maybe bring this all together, here's what Noah would have told his children, and over time, as it's passed down by word of mouth, one of the iterations of the cherubim in Mesopotamian mythology is what you would call the lamassu, and he's there on the right, and you can see even the lamassu and the Nandi, well, they're sort of similar. Of course, he's got wings, and this guy doesn't, but still, human head, bull body, bull body. Why is this? It's because they're remembering the same thing over hundreds of years, passing down the history over hundreds of years by word of mouth. Now, this is that guy, Praveen Mohan, that I mentioned before. This is one of his. This is a screenshot from one of his videos. This is Brahman. He is thought to be the creator. And I believe what's going on here is that this is inside Panchavarnaswamy temple. Say that 3 times fast. And it's sort of interesting because it's sort of in the dark area of the temple. It's very much inside the temple. You have Brahma, the creator. He has a bucket here on his arm. I believe this is the tree of life, or it's a remembrance of the tree of life. Now they also have, or there also is here, a lingam. The lingam, at least one interpretation or one view of the lingam, is that it was used, or it helped to generate the universe in an act of creation. So it would make sense that they would put this in what they remember as being the Garden of Eden, tree of life. Now, what's in the bucket? What's in the bucket? In Mesopotamian mythology, you see the same bucket iconography, and you also see a Kalu, or the Anunnaki, standing in front of a tree in Mesopotamian mythology. What's going on? I believe what's going on is that that bucket has water from the spring in the middle of the Garden of Eden. And that symbology is here. It's in their mythology, Mesopotamian mythology. Why? Because they're remembering the same thing. Yeah. And it's a good thing you said that, because I'm just about ready to wrap up. I'm ready to wrap up right now. I'll flash back to an earlier slide, but I added the Shroud of Turin. If you want to know more about the Shroud of Turin, you can check out my lecture on the Shroud of Turin. Why am I showing this chart? I'm showing this chart because if this is the Ark of Noah, on this chart, I believe we have 3 most important treasures that the world has. The most important treasure the world has, of course, is the Word of God. All those manuscripts like the Dead Sea Scrolls, as a for instance, and all the other ones. All those combined, that is the most precious thing that mankind has. Other than that, the Ark of the Covenant would be another precious thing. Other than that, I believe the Shroud of Turin, the Ark of Noah, and the Red Record, which is an amazing document. These are earth treasures. And with that, my hope is that you have been encouraged like I have been. I always get encouraged when I do these lectures, because what am I finding? I'm finding the Bible is true again. It's true again. And it's my hope that you also believe that the Bible is true. And with that, we'll end it because we got to leave soon.
Yeah.